Science is mostly about failing, but you're failing forward. Well, that didn't work, that didn't work. Hey, try this. Oops, couldn't reproduce it. Try this. Oh, there you go, you reproduced it. So you're mostly failing until you hit that little nugget of truth that maybe you can hold on to for a while. But when you're in it, it looks like mostly failing. This is when the senior vice president looked at me and gave me one of the biggest red pills I've ever choked down. Are you ready for it? You can live this experience vicariously. This is one of the biggest red pills you will ever eat. Big corporation. I'm in charge of figuring out which branches are doing well and which are not. I tell my boss that my own data is worthless. Worthless. Completely worthless. And worse than worthless, probably harmful. Because it's so bad, you're going to be firing people who did a great job. I mean, that's as bad as data could be, right? And when I told him that my data was completely worthless for the intended task of managing his managers, he looked at me and he gave me this red pill that I give to you. I don't care. I'm only going to use it when it agrees with what I was going to do anyway. Does science say that you will be more addicted to something if it gives you a reward every single time? Or does science say that you will be more addicted to something if it pays off sometimes, but you can't tell when? Answer: you will be more addicted if the payoffs are unpredictable. Meaning sometimes you get a payoff, sometimes you don't, and you really can't tell in advance when that's going to be. One of the things that this whole COVID thing is doing, and I talk about this in the terms of persuasion, everything that's associated with everything else gets smeared by anything that happens to one of them. So let's say you are a twin, and your twin causes a horrible murder. Well, even if you had nothing to do with it, it kind of washes over onto you. Shouldn't, but people aren't going to look at you the same. It's just the way our world works, that if there's any relationship with two things, whatever happens to one just bleeds over into the other in our irrational minds. And look what's happening as we collectively, we citizens of Earth, try to figure out what is scientific and what is not scientific in this COVID situation. And the more we wrestle with this, and the more we see science failing and failing and failing, correcting, failing, correcting. Now the correcting part is the good part. And of course, as we all are sophisticated and know, science is mostly about failing, but you're failing forward. Well, that didn't work, that didn't work. Hey, try this. Oops, couldn't reproduce it. Try this. Oh, there you go, you reproduced it. So you're mostly failing until you hit that little nugget of truth that maybe you can hold on to for a while. But when you're in it, it looks like mostly failing, right? If you get to just check out the end result, it's like, hey, good job, scientists. We figured out gravity and whatever else. But if you're actually in the process of the science creating the answers and not knowing the answers, it just looks like science is completely incompetent. It's not. It's not. Science is every bit as good as it was last year when you trusted it more. It's just that you're in the fight and you get to see all the ugly stuff because they can't hide it. Now, what's that do to your thoughts about climate change? Well, there should be no effect. If we were rational creatures, we would say, oh, you can't compare these two things. One is a fog of war, it's brand new, it's a novel coronavirus, trying as hard as we can. Of course we're wrong more than we're right. That's how science works. Until you become more right than you're wrong. Don't know how long that takes. We're going to have to test a lot of stuff and make sure we can reproduce those tests and everything else. But what about climate change? Suddenly, whatever bad feelings you're going to develop from this about science, and you know you are, right? I don't care who you are. If you're watching this, it's hard to be just as confident about scientists as it was a year ago. A year ago, I'll bet you felt a little bit better about the accuracy of science. Now you're going to take that to the climate change discussion, and even if you don't acknowledge that baggage is coming with you, it's coming with you. It's coming with you. And it's healthy. Because the problem with the climate argument is that there's a bit of an overclaim about what they can know about the future. Certainly about the economics of the future and how we'll adjust to higher temperatures, etc. I am on, in case anybody's new to this, I'm on the team that says temperatures are almost certainly going up and that humans are some part of that, but it doesn't mean it's the end of the world because we're really good at adapting. So that's my view. Let me give you an anecdote from my past that will be useful in understanding the present. We are obsessed with trying to figure out which of our leaders are brilliant and which of them are idiots, right? It's sort of our main occupation. Oh, that Swedish prime minister or whatever they have, king. I don't know, what does Sweden have? Do they have a president, prime minister? I have no idea. That's how American I am. I'm so American, I don't even know the form of government of our allies. That's as American as you can get. Am I proud of it? Not necessarily. All right, here's my story. When I was working at Crocker Bank, a big bank that was bought by Wells Fargo later, but in San Francisco it was a real big bank, and my job was to study the performance of the individual branch managers on a variety of measures that senior management would provide. They'd say, you have to cross-sell this much and bring in these many deposits, etc. And then I was in charge of collecting all the data, putting it into some kind of summary reports, doing a little programming to make reports, and to tell management which managers did better. But apparently I'm the wrong person for that job, because that's not how it went. I went into the senior vice president, who was sort of the person I mostly reported to for this information, and I said, you know, if I'm being honest, you're not really measuring what the managers, you're not really measuring the skill of the managers. Because if you give them a goal, and some exceed the goal, and some don't meet the goal, but the goal is different for each branch, right? So every branch had its own goal that was customized for their situation. I said, if you find out that somebody exceeded their goal and somebody did not, what have you actually measured? Have you measured the quality of the manager? I would say no. What you measured is the quality of the person who set the goal, right? Because whoever set that target, what if they were wrong? What if it was unrealistically high? What if it was unrealistically low? You haven't measured the quality of the management. All you've done is measured the quality of your measuring. And you didn't even really do that, right? On top of that, I said, you do realize that even the data, forget about the fact that measuring against these arbitrary goals that senior management made, forget about the fact that that's nonsense. Even the data is wrong. And I said to my boss, it's my job, I guarantee you that the data that's coming in is not reliable. And I gave reasons, this data is not reliable for this reason. I had to use an estimate, I had to make an assumption, whatever. And this is when the senior vice president looked at me and gave me one of the biggest red pills I've ever choked down. Are you ready for it? You can live this experience vicariously. This is one of the biggest red pills you will ever eat. Big corporation, I'm in charge of figuring out which branches are doing well and which are not. I tell my boss that my own data is worthless. Worthless. Completely worthless. And worse than worthless, probably harmful. Because it's so bad, you're going to be firing people who did a great job. I mean, that's as bad as data could be, right? And my senior vice president, who was one of these, I honestly think he was one of these enlightened people. He wasn't like a regular boss. There was something different about this guy. Bill Riley was his name. I hope he's still alive. He was a 6 foot, I think he was 6'8", bearded elf of a guy. And there was just something a little bit more aware about him. You could tell it. It wasn't just that he was smart. He was just seeing things a little more clearly. And when I told him that my data was completely worthless for the intended task of managing his managers, he looked at me and he gave me this red pill that I give to you. I don't care. I'm only going to use it when it agrees with what I was going to do anyway. How's that taste? He wasn't kidding. It's exactly what he did. When there was a manager that he felt, for his own reasons, was not doing the job, he'd check my numbers. If they coincidentally said that manager did not meet their numbers, he'd say, well, okay, good. Hey, you didn't meet your numbers, you're out of here. Not because of the numbers, because he was going to fire him anyway. And if he found somebody he thought was doing a good job, but their numbers were bad, he'd look at it and he'd say, damn, we better adjust your goals. It looks like we messed up. If you think that data is real, you're not quite out of the children's table. Data is almost always not real. I know. I was in charge of inventing unreal data. It was my professional job to make data that wasn't accurate, and we still used it for decisions. So if you don't understand that that's the normal way the world works, that's not the exception. It's not the exception, because when I changed to Pacific Bell, it was just more of the same. I had similar kinds of jobs. So, and of course, the Dilbert cartoon was born out of that experience. Specifically, the experience that the insanity that I experienced at one company wasn't limited to that company. The moment I changed jobs, and I realized, my first thought was, I'm free. I'm getting away from that company that makes irrational decisions. Finally, I'm at the phone company now, and now it's all going to be, good, rational. No. Nope. So apparently Q, or QAnon, has gone worldwide. Did you know that? So instead of being a silly American thing, Q has apparently gone worldwide. And it's becoming, I would argue, a bit of a religion. Now, not quite yet, but it's moving in that direction. And you might say to yourself, I don't quite understand why that's spreading. Isn't that so obviously not true that it couldn't possibly spread? I mean, how do we not have herd immunity against Q? You know what I mean? There should be enough people in your family or your social circle to say, yeah, Bob, I know you're interested in this stuff, but I've got to tell you, it doesn't look too credible to me. Well, let me suggest this for context. Let's bring science into it. Does science say that you will be more addicted to something if it gives you a reward every single time? Or does science say that you will be more addicted to something if it pays off sometimes, but you can't tell when? Answer: you will be more addicted if the payoffs are unpredictable. Meaning sometimes you get a payoff, sometimes you don't, and you really can't tell in advance when that's going to be. That one causes addiction. What is Q? Q is a bunch of predictions, often with enough vagueness that you could fit them to different situations. But does Q get big things wrong, such as, I think, arresting Hillary Clinton was one of them? Yes. Does it matter that they get things wrong? Because you say to yourself, if you see them getting things wrong, doesn't that disprove the whole we have insider information thing? I mean, they'd never be wrong if it was insider information, or rarely wrong. But that's not how the brain works. If you bought into Q and you see them get one thing right and 3 things wrong, will you be more attracted to it or less? You want to say less, don't you? You want to say, well, if it got 3 out of 4 things wrong, Any reasonable person is going to walk away. Nope. Nope. Opposite. If it gets 1 out of 4 right, you make people addicted. It becomes a religion at 1 and 4. How often do your prayers get answered? 1 and 4? If you pray for a promotion, 1 and 4 times, if you wait long enough, you might get one. Was it the prayer? Well, that's for you to decide. But what I'm saying is that the nature of religion, which gives you unpredictable payoffs for your praying and your religiosity, and the rest of the time you say, well, God is not an ATM. I mean, I don't just put a prayer in and take money out. He works in mysterious ways. That's part of the process. If I got 1 and 4 prayers, I'm addicted. Likewise, Q. If he gets 1 and 4, you're addicted. The other thing that it has in common with religion, and again, I'm not going to, if this sounds like I'm mocking religion, then you're hearing it wrong. I'm just telling you that there are things which bind things to a movement, and they're fairly common and universal. And it works for religion, and it works for Q, which is not to say that either of them are false. It's just the way people think. So the vagueness of the predictions is very powerful, because when you have vague predictions, people do the work for you. And so let's say you had 4 predictions. 1 of them is clearly right, but could have been right by coincidence. Could have been a good guess. And let's say 2 of them are a little bit ambiguous. Well, it's going to look like to a believer, it's going to look like 3 out of 4 were right, because they're going to say this one is definitely right, and these other 2, well, if I didn't have this one that was right, maybe I wouldn't believe that those vague things are true. But since I got one right, I'm going to say these other 2 were close enough. The way they were worded allows for me to say that this thing that happened fits. And now suddenly you're 3 out of 4. 3 out of 4. So vagueness works in favor of belief, because it lets you fill in the blanks. This is, by the way, a standard hypnosis trick. I use it all the time. I use it when I create my comic. The reason that Dilbert doesn't have a last name, company doesn't have a name, Dilbert's boss doesn't have a name, not a first name, not a last name. It's all intentional, because it allows the reader to read into it and fill in those open spots, and it makes you more addicted to the property. Here's the other thing that religion and Q gets right. If you spend time working on something, you will be more addicted to it. It's just natural. Just the things you focus on become more important to you over time. The nature of Q is that they say do your own research. So you take the Q as your starting point, and then you go off and do a bunch of work. You invest your time. Once you've invested your time in something, you're done. All right? You've married yourself to the movement, because once you put time into it, you can't explain it to yourself except that you believe it. And that's part of what you do. So religion, like Q, asks the people who are believers to do their own work. Read this Bible, can be interpreted in many ways. Go listen to how different religious people are interpreting it. Find your own connections, figure it out yourself. And I think there's something nerdily delicious about trying to unwind these mysteries, be they religious or be they Q. So I think the operative things are that you get unpredictable rewards, there's vagueness, and that last thing. All right. So there's a reason that Q is growing. It's not an accident.